It never used to be there, but one day, when something terrible happened, it arrived. It's never left my side since. I don't think anyone else can see it, but I can. Its gaze wears on me every day. Some days, I think it's gone. I don't see it, and for once, I feel a bit freed. A giant weight lifted off my downtrodden shoulders. But then, out of the corner of my eye, I see it staring at me, and the panic ramps up again and again, until I'm once again forced to shut the world out of my mind. When it first arrived, I was shocked and horrified. Had the Grim Reaper personally decided to come and collect my soul? Days passed as it sat there and stared. No words spoken, no gestures, just staring. Enough to drive anyone mad. I had tried everything I could to deny that there was a creature now attached to me. I had tried everything to shake it. Yelling and screaming in its face did nothing. It sat there, stoic, like a rock who had been chiseled into a fine statue. I knew then it would never leave my side. A twisted sidekick who did more harm than it ever did well. I find myself more of a recluse now than I ever was. It's hard to go out and enjoy the world with a horrible creature following you around all day and night. My friends began to move on. Instead of waiting for me to become just like the old me, they just accepted the new me and left. I don't blame them, though. In the wise words of Frank Sinatra, that's life. Pain and guilt have ripped through my veins on more occasions than dopamine ever had a chance to in my seemingly short and miserable lifespan. I can barely sleep anymore. For when I try to, I just see him in the chair I used to pile my dirty clothes, staring at me, unwavering. Slowly, the beast had whittled me down to my core. I was a wreck, a lonely, emotionally starved wreck. I wish every night as I try to fall asleep that nothing bad would have happened to me. I wish I would have never had those drinks. I wish I would have never decided I was okay to drive home. I wish I would have never hit that other car. So many things I had wished for. And now instead of wishing, I was cursed with this beast to follow me around like a sick form of repentance. Anger took hold of me next. I know that I killed a young family and their newborn because of my terrible actions. I know. No one lets me forget that. I pray to whoever is out there that they could take me instead. But no, I'm stuck here to wander this desolate world alone, with no one to keep me company but this massive, disgusting, foul thing. Once I had finally been fed up with its incessant staring, I tried to fight it, to no avail, my anger taking hold of my entire being. Knives and guns and anything else I tried did nothing to it. It was as though the creature wasn't of this plane of existence, like a ghost. It continued to stare and eat away at my soul. It was at this period of my life that I had become the most depressed I'd ever felt. I knew that I had messed up. I take that knowledge with me everywhere I go. Many times had I decided it was the end of the road for me. Many times I had tied the makeshift noose with a sturdy leather belt. Many times I had climbed up and placed my head through the hoop just to see the beast still there, staring. Its eyes communicating to me that it did not care whether I was alive or dead. It would follow me wherever I go. It was those same eyes that somehow gave me the strength to not do it. The beast isn't all bad. It stares at me with those voids, day in and day out. But I've been trying to fix my life. I've begun to attend Alcoholics Anonymous meetings. May sound funny, but it's oddly comforting to see the beast at those meetings. It's like an old friend is there with me. Lately, I don't see him around as much. It can be days or even weeks before it rears its ugly head at me once again. The darkest days have passed, and he still haunts me on the bad days. The worst is over. I've finally begun to get my life back. When I attended court, I quickly realized that it was a fight I was sure to lose. For good reason, too, because I did do it. During a break in the case, I told my lawyer that I wanted to plead guilty, the first step to long and painful remediation. I've now been sentenced to 3 counts of involuntary manslaughter. I deserve those 3 counts. The beast wasn't with me that day in court. How strange. As I write this in my cell, not sure of who will see, it sits across from me. It's oddly comforting to have my old friend with me through it all. I think I've finally come to grips with the beast, and I know now what to call it. It will never leave my side. It may go away for a while, but it will always be here. There is hope that I can coexist with this creature. I've given it a name in hopes that one day I can reconcile with it, or better yet, with myself. I named it grief. Thrifting has never been my thing. Call me pompous or uppity or any adjective you deem fit. Thrifting has never been my motto. I have nothing against it. I understand why it's there. I just like new, unused products. I like the smell of new plastic, even if it's that shitty cheap stuff from China. There's no greater pleasure in life than opening up something that's new. Peeling those protectors off screens on phones, popping bubble wrap that protected your shipment. It just feels right. But what doesn't always feel right is the price tags. Recently, I've fallen onto hard times. I work for an office supply store, a horribly unappealing job. With everything nowadays going digital, office supply stores are beginning to phase out. Everything can be ordered from our online store, so what's the use in storefronts? Luckily, the company puts on the mask of giving a shit about us enough to not just shut down immediately but slowly phase it out. They gave us a 4-month warning, saying that we needed to begin searching for some new work. So I turned to thrifting. As I said, I had nothing against the act of thrifting. I just preferred my stuff to not have the smell of rotting basement etched into its history with no amount of detergent able to wipe the slate clean. My tune had quickly changed, for the most part. I still hate that mildewy smell that emanates off any nice jacket I've found. I've started to love the thrill of the hunt, though, spending days in various locations searching for those hidden gems. I'm not an overly exciting person, so to say that it got my adrenaline pumping would be an understatement. I turned my newfound love of thrifting towards searching for electronics. With all my free time, I spent a decent chunk of it watching videos online of old computers. Whenever I would go out to search for things, I would keep an eye out for old PC parts. Eventually, I had enough to cobble together an old IBM machine. The white plastic monitor now heavily yellowed from years of active service. The keyboard was squishy and full of crumbs. The tower was a hefty beast, weighing 15 pounds on its own. The day I started that thing up was one of the greatest achievements of my life, and also the day I thought I would die. It sounded like a jet engine was taking off. Whirs and clicks ruptured through the tower. When it finally booted up and took me to a desktop screen, I realized that there was an old floppy disk that had been stuck in the tower. My mind raced with possibilities. Was it some old photos? Am I going to get a voyeuristic look into someone's life from the past? Is it music? I clumsily searched the computer's files trying to find out how to access it. When I finally came across the only thing it could be, I found it locked. Somehow, and I didn't even know that this was possible. Somehow they had locked the disc from opening. I needed a code. Well, just my luck, there was no code to be found anywhere. My adrenaline was once again racing. I needed to get in. Morbid curiosity had a stranglehold on me. I decided to take the tower's side off in order to see if I could manually eject the disc and bring it into a local computer store and see if they could crack it for me. Just as I took the case off and began to reach for the disc reader, I noticed an etching on the inside of the case. 01010010, 01110101, 01101110, 00101110. I jotted it down on a nearby notepad and gave it a try on the file on the computer. Voila! A master sleuth cracks the code once again. I was in. And to my surprise, it was just a game. It was called Zonk. It was still early in the evening, so I thought to hell with it. Let's try it, right? I came this far, and as much as I was hoping to be able to spy on someone's life from 1993, I just got a game. When I launched it, I was greeted with a low pixel render of some cutesy character. He looked like a mix between Q*bert and Mickey Mouse. It was oddly close to copyright infringement on both accounts. The titles above him just read Zonk. He just sat there, moving slightly back and forth with a jaunty little MIDI tune playing in the background. I pressed the enter key on my well-used keyboard and was greeted with a wall of green blocky text amidst a black background. Greetings, player. You are about to embark on a great and mythical quest. Zonk is trapped in a castle in the far reaches of space, and you are his only hope to help him escape and reclaim his lost home. Using your keyboard, type to Zonk what he should do next. I was then sent straight to a new screen. Zonk was there in what looked like to be a cell. He stood there staring into the proverbial camera, waiting for instruction. The graphics were surprisingly beautiful for the time. It looked way ahead of its time, and I was confused as to why it hadn't made more of a splash, for that alone when it had released. I typed in to search the room. Just as I hit enter, I realized that the command may be too complex for a game this old. Hell, it's probably too complex for a game made today. It didn't matter, however. Zonk was already moving about the scene. The crude graphics and choppy animations went into overdrive. He tore the seemingly modern-looking room apart in search of items. To my surprise, he arrived back at the forefront of the scene with his quirky smile and the happy chip tune playing. Zonk found something. It appears that it can help him escape the room. Clear as day, the game spelled out what I should do next, so I did it. Zonk headed to the door and waited. An awkward amount of time had passed before anything had happened. It was still. I thought perhaps it was loading the next scene. Suddenly, Zonk launched back into action. It was not what I was expecting to see. The music had drained from the scene. He sprung his spindly arms through the small barred gap that was the top half of the wooden door. I wasn't sure what he was doing until I saw a second cartoony figure dragged in by Zonk and bashed up against the door. Zonk had a hold on the character's neck. With one quick motion, he pulled out something and jammed it into the character's neck. The happy music returned, and Zonk turned back to the camera, like nothing out of the ordinary had happened. I was freaked out. Was this some hacked game? Maybe it was one of those games that had the guise of kids' game, but with some darker underlying theme. Like that literature club game that circled the internet a few years back. I reasoned to myself that it was just a spoof game, like that which I just mentioned. I pressed on. I typed in a command to exit the room, and he did so without hesitation. We entered a new scene. It was that of a hallway. It looked more like a hospital than some castle in the far reaches of outer space that is touted at the beginning of the game. I typed in to head down the hall, and so we did. As weird as it was to say, I felt attached to Zonk, like we were a team. Sure, the game took me by surprise. I didn't know it was going to be a horror game, but I'd be damned if I didn't love a good scare now and then. Zonk rushed down the hall, the bouncy music looping, over and over, enough to drive someone mad. When we got to the end of the hall, there was another one of those cartoony-looking characters. I got a better look at them now, and it again looked like it was on the cusp of copyright infringement. It was nearly a spitting image of the Disney character Pete, but they wore a night uniform. Again, not very spacey, but I also did just witness one get stabbed to death, so who am I to say right now? The guard was clearly taken off guard when they saw Zonk. It seemed nearly unscripted. The guard fumbled and tried to subdue Zonk. Meanwhile, he just stood there, staring at the camera, happily bouncing back and forth as he always did when waiting for a command. I felt rushed and didn't know what to do, so I typed in a command to fight. It was like I had unleashed some kind of monster. Zonk, with barely any effort, grabbed him by the throat again, still happily dancing back and forth on the screen. He lifts the guard up and crushed his windpipe. The low-quality sounds plopped out of my speakers like tar dripping down a wall. When I regained my composure and my morbid curiosity still had me in its grips, I had decided to press on. I sent the command for Zonk to leave. I was greeted with another wall of text. Congratulations! You have completed the first section of Zonk. With Zonk safely out of the castle, he is now free to complete his goal of reclaiming his home. The game placed me with Zonk on a street. He was in his usual place, standing and staring into the camera, happily bouncing back and forth to the music. There were people that walked by occasionally. When they entered the frame and saw Zonk, they changed. They ran. The graphics were great for the time, but still limited. No amount of limitations could hide the fear in their faces, though. I wasn't sure what to do next, so I just typed in the command for map. Sure enough, it seemed to work. A map appeared on the screen and it showed a small city. There was one place with an X on it that was circled and had Old Friend written by it. I decided to go there. I input go to Old Friend's house. The screen went to black. I thought the game had locked up again. No audio. The tower clicked in Word just as it had did when it first booted up. I thought maybe everything had crashed. Come to find out it had. The PC must have overheated or something. It shut right down. I left it be for a few minutes and decided to fix myself some food and drink. I didn't realize that it had been a few hours since I sat down to play this game. When I returned, I tried to boot it up, and it started with no hitches. Sure, it whirred and clicked, but I came to realize that that was the norm for this big old beauty. Once everything was back up and running, I went to launch the game again, worried all my progress had been lost. Games this old never had autosaves. When I launched it, I was immediately placed outside of Old Friend's house. Zonk was stood there, staring happily like always. It was so immediate that I jump-scared myself. I wasn't expecting to see that face so close up, and so soon after I typed the command into DOS to start the game up again. This time, I had no control over the game. No command did anything. I was just treated to the game playing itself. Zonk slowly crept up the steps leading to the house, bouncing happily back and forth to the music. And just when he was standing in the front of the door, I noticed something. The house looked more and more like mine. The number on the house was the same as mine. I tried to quit the game, but I kept getting error message after error message. Congratulations, you've won. Congratulations, you've won. Congratulations, you've won. Then, the doorbell rang. Alright, this is gonna be a weird one, so buckle your seatbelts. My little brother's name is Josh. He just turned 8 and he's freaking me out lately. He's told me before about his imaginary friend, but only recently did I find the picture he drew of her. Her name, he says, is P-O-T. I don't know what that means, but it's pronounced top. I asked why, but he says he didn't know. I found the drawing on his bed. It was him and this weird figure, with a dress and weird black and tangled long hair. The caption he wrote read, "Top, my friend. It was really weird, and I shrugged it off as a little kid with bad drawing skills, and I told myself imaginary friends are normal for kids his age. But why did it creep me out so much? It gets worse. He told me at night she goes outside to hunt flies and eats them. We went outside one night, and I asked him where Top was now. He said, "They're in the grass, catching flies." I shined my phone light over there, but there was nothing. I asked Josh why I couldn't see her. He said, "She's my friend, not yours." That's when I figured it was just his very strange, imaginative mind at work. A few days later, I'd forgotten the whole thing mostly. I was sitting on our couch watching a show when Josh stared off into the distance and said, "Top's right there." I whirled around to see him pointing to the far wall. I told him to stop because he was genuinely freaking me out. Then he said she doesn't have a face, but she can still smile at him. I got up and left the room. No way. About a week later, we were eating dinner and I asked Josh, "Where's Top now?" He answered with, "Right beside you." That made me shiver, and I asked my mom why he had made up a friend so strange. She told me how sometimes he needs a little friend to play with when I'm not around. Josh said, "She's always lived here. She told me she wants to meet you, Gage." I had trouble finishing dinner. I'd always been paranoid, but this was a little stranger than usual. I researched stuff about imaginary friends that are creepy, and there's all sorts of stuff about kids with imaginary friends, like a man in all black or a monster with red eyes. That night I walked past my brother's room and heard him talking. I couldn't hear what he was saying, but was distracted when a buzzing went past my ear. It was a fly. The fly went through the crack in my brother's room door. I tried to think of it as a coincidence, but it wasn't helping. I let myself into his room and confronted him. As soon as I entered, he stopped talking. He was just sitting crisscross on the floor, and out of the corner of my eye I saw it. A girl, in a dirty dress, darted into his closet. I swear I saw it. It was so fast. I yelled for our mom to come up and see as I ran to flick on the closet light. There was nothing but my brother's clothes in there. I turned to Josh. "Where is she? Huh? Where?" Josh said, "She's just shy." When my mom got upstairs, I told her what happened. She told me to go to bed and that it was too damn late to be up horsing around. I got to my room and had troubling dreams when I finally fell asleep. Could I be crazy? Could it have been a trick of the light I saw? It looked just like a little girl in a dress that quickly jumped into the closet to hide from me. Yesterday, I walked past his room to hear him whispering, "Top, Top, Top, Top." And when I looked down at the floor, I saw piles of dead flies. The stony crags were interspersed with rust-colored dunes, spanning the valley in which we had made camp. We were tourists to this forbidding place, having spent a life savings worth to join this expedition, this carnival of disciplines, each vying to outdo the other. The wind often hung in the air as though reluctant to journey through this place, yet still a soft breeze could be felt, stirring dust into devils before whisking across my sunburned face. It contained a hint of melancholy, it seemed, as if it were unsure of its welcome within our bustling camp. And bustling it was. The encampment stretched across 3 or 4 acres, and many had brought their wives and children along to show them the world outside of their parlors, as they said. While a few seemed to genuinely enjoy their adventure, grumbling could be heard as a low rumble across the valley, especially on a day as today, when the sun is fierce, the wind listless, and the sky empty. The grumbling had increased this last month. Wives and daughters with immaculate hands and shiny hair sat in circles beneath pavilions, fanning themselves or having their maids do so for them. The specifics were never heard, but the tone certainly carried through. The expedition had lasted much longer than it was supposed to have. These delicate dolls had been promised a return to their parlors a season ago, and their viperous demeanors grew ever more disdainful of the men who had dragged them from their lairs. The men, for their part, were oblivious, with one recent exception: myself. I had noticed one night that my shoes were more worn than they had a right to be. Yes, I was clambering over stones and digging in dunes, but the soles had no business being nearly gone. Curious, I began rummaging through my luggage, taking out threadbare cotton shirts and trousers, all in a state of worn disrepair. Even the luggage containers themselves looked old and tired, though they had been freshly purchased for this trip. The following morning, after I spent a restless night with the shadow of unease hanging over me, I found myself putting the strange findings from my mind. Not deliberately, no, but with such a mechanical roteness to it that I did not recognize my own mind. Strange indeed, I thought. The morning after that is when the obelisk appeared. It rose from the earth to sky, a towering darkness that cast its shadow from the center of the valley. When I pointed it out to Arthur, after skittering across the sudden expanse from my tent to his in the purple pre-dawn light, he claimed to have already been inside it. He looked at me askance for a moment before continuing. "John, you curious, capricious fellow, you were right beside me." When I tried to press, for I had no memory of this apparent joint adventure, he slid away from the subject like an eel through jelly. I found myself sliding with him the more I tried to remember what was so important as to make me rush over here in the wee hours of dawn, before eventually giving it up. The obelisk's specter hovered over me for the remainder of the day. Each time I turned, I saw it from the corner of my eye. Each time I spoke, I heard its presence in my mind. Each time I closed my eyes, I felt it grow ever closer, though its position never changed. When I awoke that final morning, I awoke with purpose, wonderful, joyous purpose, that would wipe the complaints from the mouths of the unworthy. It swarmed across my soul and drowned me in its virility, forcing gasps of air in and out as I undulated beneath the onslaught. It filled me, brimming over and pouring out my eyes, my nose, my ears. Every orifice I had was overflowing with glorious purpose. My purpose drove me to the valley's center, racing across the shifting sands and falling over jagged rocks. Each landing brought its own peculiar pain that settled deep within my joints as I pushed myself up, bleeding and scraped, to stumble forward once more. Ragged breaths burned my lungs as I was summoned ever closer, answering the call that boiled through my veins. The monument's base filled my sight when I stood at last in front of it. Its blackened stones rose for eternity to touch its cap of spiraling storm-filled clouds. A deep crevice cleaved through the center of it, an opening into the world of wonder and darkness that awaited me, awaited us. Yes, it awaited us. Us, the explorers and believers, the doubters and recanters. I wiped a wetness from my cheek, tears of joy and understanding as I stood before my destiny and watched the tentacles slither out. I spread my arms to embrace them, laughing as they caressed the blood from my face and whispered in the language of the forsaken. They lifted my broken form and drew me deep within, into the blackness of its being. I hung there, suspended, my brain dripping from my sockets as it filled me with its essence, its purpose. I know not how long it kept me, feeding me its soul, piece by piece as it consumed me. I know only that the world I emerged to is not the one I left. It has moved on and left me, left us behind. There are no more forbidden expeditions to anomalous valleys or investigations into the hidden horrors of the universe. Science has done its best to destroy the obelisk we call home, concealing it beneath layers of rationality and physics. But now we have awoken to a fierce and blistering sun, and we will bring humanity within our embrace once more. Fear the shadows in the darkness, child, for we are coming. Red Skull by Insidious Nebula. The clock resounded the enrapturing hour of midnight, penetrating its vociferous clangor deep within my bedchamber. My absorbing and tranquil slumber so heinously interrupted, like an opportunistic vagabond removing the silver from my corpse. Upon my antiquated oak door happened a knocking. Impetus, venomous even, this damned drumming filled my heart with a deep-seated dread. The hour of witches and ghouls was no realm for a mortal soul like my own, fragile and forlorn. Fear soon washed over me, like an illusory baptism, the devil officiating my wretched day of reckoning. I opened the door, that portal to hell, with a generous amount of trepidation, like that of a timid youngling. There, suspended in animation, was a skull so terribly red in hue. Vibrant vermilion evocative of carnage, that bestial skull was superimposed by sputtering black flames, by raging, engulfing hellfire. The sound, the horrid opera of crepitating bone filled my ears. The ghastly melody threatened to shatter my psyche. Its jaw suddenly quivered, and a torrent of blood poured from its mouth, forming a viscous puddle at my feet. From the darkest depths of this nightmarish presence bellowed out an abysmal, guttural moan, like that of the condemned, of the loathsome, of the tortured animals left to rot in their own shit. Violent convulsions soon bewitched the skull as it hissed something akin to human expression. I shall never consign to oblivion the wickedness of that night. Even now, as I lie in my bed amongst my thoughts, the haunting recollection of that ethereal being sparks within my breast an inflation of terror. The persistent echo of what it said to me. Revel in it, brother. Encounter by Insidious Nebula. As I lie in my bed, slowly drifting away, an odd spirit perched himself upon the foot of my bed. Completely black in color, yet his body buzzed with static. His eyes glowed a bright and luminescent red. He said nothing, only letting out a few maniacal giggles. Then, without warning, he grinned so heinously. Now visible in the low light were rows of razor-sharp teeth. They were yellowed and crusted with what had to be blood. What happened next is a mystery. The dark spirit lunged at me with ferocity. All that I can recollect is a terrifying cackle that pierced the air. That, and a sinking pain deep in my neck. When I awoke, dawn had overtaken the long night. The creature was gone, yet 2 puncture wounds now existed on my neck. In addition, a small black abnormality has appeared on my skin. Like the black figure, it too buzzes with static.